In 2008, inside a small police station in Ghazni, Afghanistan, a thin, wounded woman sat behind a curtain while American soldiers and FBI agents questioned her. Her name was Aafia Siddiqui, a neuroscientist who once studied at Massachusetts Institute of Technology and earned a PhD from Brandeis University. Now, she was being called one of the most dangerous women in the world. What happened next would lead to gunfire, a rushed hospital transfer, and eventually an 86-year prison sentence in the United States. But the real story isn't just about a single moment in Ghazni. It's about the years that came before and the questions that still refuse to go away. Before she became a global headline, Aafia Siddiqui was known as someone completely different, a quiet, brilliant student from Karachi. She was born into a respected family, where education and religion shaped everyday life. Her father was a neurosurgeon, her mother a religious teacher and social worker, and her siblings went on to build successful careers abroad. From the outside, it looked like the kind of family that produced doctors, researchers, and professors, not international controversy. In 1990, Aafia left Pakistan and moved to the United States, first joining the University of Houston and later transferring to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. At MIT, classmates described her as polite, soft-spoken, and deeply religious, someone who stayed focused on her work and avoided distractions. She graduated with a biology degree and later earned a PhD in neuroscience from Brandeis University, building what appeared to be the perfect academic future. But while her academic life moved forward, her beliefs and activism also grew stronger. She became involved in religious organizations, charity work, and student groups, spending more time prompting Islamic causes and raising awareness about conflicts affecting Muslim communities.
It is my challenge, not only to every single person on the face of this planet Earth, but also, if there's any civilization on any other planet, it's my challenge to them as well, that Islam is the best savior and protector for women.
To supporters, she was committed and passionate. To critics, some of these early associations would later raise serious questions. At this point, she was still a scientist, a mother, and a young woman with a promising future. Nothing about her life suggested that she would one day disappear, reappear in Afghanistan years later, and become one of the most debated figures in modern Pakistani history. And that raises the real question. How did a neuroscientist from Karachi end up at the center of one of the most controversial cases of the War on Terror? By the early 2000s, the life Aafia Siddiqui had built in America was beginning to crack from the inside. Her marriage to anesthesiologist Amjad Mohammed Khan was no longer stable. Arguments became frequent, and the tension grew worse as Aafia became more deeply involved in religious activism and ideas about jihad. At one point, a violent argument left her injured and needing stitches, showing just how strained the relationship had become. What once looked like a normal academic family in Massachusetts was slowly turning into something far more unstable. Then came 9/11. After the attacks, Aafia insisted the family leave the United States immediately, convinced their lives were in danger if they stayed. Back in Pakistan, she pushed for something even more extreme, moving near the Afghan border and helping Taliban fighters as medical support. Her husband refused, and the gap between them only widened. Within months, their marriage collapsed, and by October 2002, the divorce was final. But the end of the marriage was only the beginning of a much darker chapter. Around this time, American investigators had already started asking questions about her purchases of night vision equipment, military manuals, and protective gear. The FBI began interviewing people connected to her, trying to understand whether these were harmless purchases or part of something bigger. Soon after, she left the United States again and returned to Pakistan, moving further away from her old academic life. In early 2003, reports began linking her to individuals connected with Al-Qaeda, including relatives of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the mastermind behind the 9/11 attacks. U.S. intelligence claimed she helped with administrative and logistical support for operatives, including opening a post office box and assisting travel documents for alleged operative Majid Khan. Her family denied these accusations, and her legal team later argued that much of the testimony against her came from detainees who were interrogated under harsh conditions. By March 2003, the situation had escalated so much that the FBI issued a global alert to locate her for questioning. A neuroscientist who once walked the halls of MIT was now being tracked by international intelligence agencies. And within days of that alert, she would disappear completely, along with her 3 children, leaving behind one of the most mysterious and controversial chapters in the entire case. On the 30th of March 2003, Aafia Siddiqui left her parents' home in Karachi with her 3 children, telling them she was traveling to Islamabad to visit an uncle, and from that moment onward, she seemed to disappear from the world without a trace. Just days earlier, the Federal Bureau of Investigation had issued a worldwide alert seeking her for questioning, and as news of the alert spread, fear and confusion quickly took over, turning what should have been a routine trip into the beginning of one of the most debated disappearances of the War on Terror. What followed was not a clean timeline, but a fog of conflicting claims, denials, and unanswered questions that stretched for years and crossed multiple countries. Her family and supporters insisted that she had been secretly detained and held in places like Bagram Airfield, with former detainees claiming they heard a woman crying in isolation and referring to her as Prisoner 650, while human rights groups raised concerns that she might have been held as an undisclosed prisoner in a system that rarely left paper trails. At the same time, American officials maintained that there was no evidence of secret detention and argued that she had simply gone into hiding after the FBI alert, moving between Pakistan and Afghanistan with networks linked to Al-Qaeda and avoiding authorities, while others connected to her were being arrested. As the years passed, the mystery only deepened because reports kept appearing and collapsing, one after another, with Pakistani newspapers claiming she had been arrested and released, intelligence officials denying involvement, relatives reporting brief sightings, and investigators quietly trying to piece together a story that never fully fit together. In 2004, U.S. Attorney General John Ashcroft publicly named her among the most wanted Al-Qaeda suspects, calling her a serious threat. Yet even after that announcement, there was still no confirmed location, no verified timeline, and no clear explanation for what had happened to her or her children during those missing years. By the time 2008 arrived, Aafia Siddiqui was no longer just a missing person or a suspect on a list, but a mystery that had grown larger than the facts themselves. And when she finally reappeared in Afghanistan under suspicious circumstances, the world was forced to confront a question that still divides opinion today. Was this the return of a fugitive who had been hiding for years, or the sudden reappearance of someone who had been lost inside a system no one fully understood? When Aafia Siddiqui was flown into the United States in August 2008 and placed inside a Manhattan courtroom for the first time, the case that had once been wrapped in mystery suddenly turned into something colder and more structured. A legal battle where every word, every document, and every action would be dissected under the harsh light of a federal trial. Her defense team, led by attorney Elaine Sharp, immediately argued that the materials allegedly found in her possession had been planted, pushing back against the government's narrative and framing the case as deeply flawed from the very beginning.
Picture this woman who's very tiny and ask yourself how she engaged in armed conflict with six military men. You know, how did that happen? And how did she get shot? I think you can answer that, can't you?
While supporters in Pakistan rallied around her, demanding answers and calling for her return. At the same time, pressure was building outside the courtroom as the Pakistan National Assembly passed a unanimous resolution calling for her repatriation, turning the trial into more than just a criminal case and transforming it into a political and emotional flashpoint that stretched across continents. To many in Pakistan, she was not simply a defendant, but a symbol of injustice and suffering in the war on terror. While to American prosecutors, she was a dangerous individual who had attempted to kill U.S. personnel during an interrogation in Afghanistan. Two completely different narratives were now colliding in one courtroom, and neither side was willing to back down. Before the trial even began, Siddiqui shocked the court by announcing that she did not trust the judge, did not trust her lawyers, and would not cooperate with the proceedings, openly boycotting the trial and placing her head down on the defense table as prosecutors continued presenting their case. The charges against her were not terrorism related in the traditional sense, but focused on attempted murder and assault, specifically the allegation that she had grabbed a U.S. Army rifle inside an Afghan interrogation room and fired at American personnel while shouting anti-American slogans. Security expert Bruce Hoffman later explained that this strategy allowed prosecutors to avoid introducing classified intelligence or controversial evidence tied to terrorism, instead presenting the case as a straightforward criminal act, something the jury could evaluate without entering the complicated world of intelligence operations. In August of 2008, she was extradited to New York with approval from Afghan authorities and placed in federal custody, appearing in court while still recovering from the gunshot wound she had received during her arrest in Ghazni. Questions about her health and mental state quickly became a major issue, as lawyers argued she had not received proper medical treatment, while prosecutors insisted she was being cared for and monitored. Multiple psychiatric evaluations followed, painting a complicated and conflicting picture on her mental condition, with some doctors diagnosing severe depression and psychosis, while others concluded that she was exaggerating or faking symptoms in order to avoid prosecution. Eventually, the court ruled that she was mentally competent to stand trial, even though concerns about her psychological state never fully disappeared. Throughout this period, her behavior in court remained unpredictable, sometimes refusing medical examinations sometimes making emotional claims about torture and secret imprisonment, and at other times, withdrawing completely from the proceedings. Government psychiatrists stated they found no clear evidence supporting her claims of torture, while Siddiqui continued insisting that she had been held in secret prisons and abused by individuals pretending to represent America, deepening the divide between her story and the official record. As the trial finally began in January of 2010 in New York, the courtroom became the stage for one of the most emotionally charged legal battles of the War on Terror era. Prosecutors presented 9 witnesses, including U.S. Army Captain Robert Snyder and FBI agent John Jefferson, who described the chaotic moment inside the Afghan facility, where Siddiqui allegedly grabbed a rifle and opened fire. Their testimony painted a picture of sudden violence in a tense war zone environment, while the defense tried to dismantle the narrative by highlighting inconsistencies in witness accounts and pointing out the absence of forensic evidence such as fingerprints on the weapon. Siddiqui herself chose to testify despite her lawyer's warnings, insisting that she had never fired the rifle and had only tried to escape because she feared being sent back to secret detention. She claimed that the documents found in her bag had been forced upon her and that she had copied them under threat to protect her children, a statement that prosecutors aggressively challenged by presenting witnesses who testified about her firearms training and the handwritten materials in her possession. The courtroom often descended into tension as she interrupted proceedings, accused witnesses of lying, and shouted statements about secret prisons and injustice, forcing the judge to remove her from the courtroom multiple times. After 2 intense weeks of testimony and 3 days of jury deliberation, the verdict finally arrived on the 3rd of February, 2010, and it was decisive. Siddiqui was found guilty on multiple counts, including attempted murder and assault on U.S. personnel, effectively ending any realistic hope of acquittal. As the verdict was read, she reacted emotionally, claiming the decision was driven by forces beyond the courtroom. A moment that captured the deep sense of distrust and division that had defined the entire case from the beginning. 7 months later, in September 2010, federal judge Richard Berman delivers the final sentence, 86 years in prison. During the sentence hearing, Siddiqui spoke calmly, telling the court that she loved America and wanted peace, asking people not to seek revenge and urging forgiveness instead. It was a striking moment, not because it changed the outcome, but because it revealed a different tone from the anger and chaos that had dominated earlier proceedings, as if the long battle had finally exhausted everyone involved. Judge Berman acknowledged the controversy surrounding her disappearance and allegations of torture, but stated that there was no credible evidence in the official record to support claims that U.S. authorities had secretly detained her for 5 years. The court ultimately focused only on the events in Afghanistan and the attempted shooting, refusing to engage with the broader political and intelligence-related questions that had surrounded her case for years. In the end, the legal system treated the case as a criminal act in a war zone rather than a chapter in the larger War on Terror narrative, and that distinction shaped the final outcome. After sentencing, Siddiqui was moved through the federal prison system and eventually placed in Federal Medical Center, Carswell, a facility designed for female inmates with medical and psychological needs, where she remains today with a projected release date decades in the future. Over the years, her case has continued to spark protests, political debates, and emotional reactions in Pakistan, where many still view her as a victim of global injustice. While in the United States, the case is largely remembered as a complex but legally resolved prosecution tied to the War on Terror. In 2023, She was visited by her sister, Aafia Siddiqui, along with human rights lawyer Clive Stafford Smith, a quiet moment that reflected how much time had passed and how far the story had traveled from the chaos of Ghazni to the tension of the New York courtroom. There were no dramatic headlines, no major legal breakthroughs, just a prison visit and a reminder that behind the politics, arguments, and court documents was still a human life moving slowly through decades of incarceration. And that is perhaps the most unsettling part of Aafia Siddiqui's story. It never truly ends in a clean or satisfying way. There is no single version of events that everyone agrees on, no final answer that resolves the mystery of her disappearance, the truth behind the allegations, or the fairness of her trial. Instead, what remains is a story suspended between two competing realities. One that sees her as a dangerous figure who tried to kill American personnel, and another that sees her as a victim of a system shaped by fear, war, and geopolitics.